Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Right out of the gate, I've got another piece of audio that I want to play here, and I think it'll carry itself all the way through, certainly the theme of all of this, I think. Because, again, this is a particular kind of behavior that is evident everywhere, certainly within American media, evil propaganda, you name it. And it really is a level of gaslighting and intellectual dishonesty, among other words, I'm sure. It's insulting to say the least, that these individuals, again, in the media, openly engage in on a constant basis, where you see something, you read something, you hear something, and then they openly and casually tell you the exact opposite. And then, of course, they front load what they say with their own opinion, thereby delegitimizing everything that they say after the fact. In essence, it's a listen to me and no one else because I'm telling you the truth, and if you have a thought of your own or you believe otherwise, then you're wrong, so just listen to me. That's basically, again, the approach that they take all of the time. And I understand that a person would say, well, Sean, you're doing that too, that we need to just listen to you and you're the only opinion. No, I've never said that. In fact, I always say the exact opposite. You don't have to listen to any of this. I want people to make up their own minds all of the time, because if they did that, they would realize that freedom exists on the other side of that. So let me set this audio clip up real quick. This is from PBS NewsHour. So right there, you know it's garbage. But either way, what you're going to hear is you're going to hear the voices of David Brooks, who is a pseudo-conservative. He's not really. He always fashioned himself as one, but he's a full-blown communist. He used to exist on some of those Sunday morning shows like ABC with George Stephanopoulos and a few others, if I'm not mistaken. He could have even been a guest occasionally on Fox News. But anyway, he writes for The Atlantic, as if, again, either he or his outlet are relevant, but they're not. And then Jonathan Capehart, who works for MS Now. And Jeff Bennett is the guy whose voice you'll hear first, and he's the host here of pbs.org/newshour. They're basically going to comment on two separate things. The first has to do with President Trump's speech from last week regarding election interference and international and even domestic interference in our elections. And again, you'll hear their tone and their words right out of the gate. It's, again, basically, if you believe anything of what he said, then you're an idiot. Okay. And then, of course, they start to talk a little bit about ICE as well. This is a 9-minute clip, but I want to play the whole thing because here's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in who they are. We know who they are, and I'm not even making fun of them, although I could. It has to do with the behavior. Again, this kind of gaslighting is why we are in the situation we are in. If we had an honest media, as Donald Trump has said continuously, and as endless people have said, if it was honest, if it was forthright, if it was objective, if it engaged in the scientific method, and it, again, looked at all of the evidence of everything that's actually happening in reality in the real world, the advancements that we would be able to make as a country would be limitless. But because endless things that occur are lies, and endless things occur that are actually real and then reported as lies, that's why you have the brainwashing that you have in American and worldwide society, because people don't know where to put their finger on a particular issue and be accurate with it all of the time. And as far as the language and the words that these two individuals use right out of the gate regarding Donald Trump's speech, this should tell everybody again that they are involved. That they are involved in the cover-up of fraudulent elections. They're either, again, willfully participating in it, and they know that Joe Biden stole the election and the media just took it, and Donald Trump's wrong about everything, because remember, these two guys on PBS know more than the chief executive of the United States, who is the commander-in-chief of every military branch. These two nitwits know more than he does. That's what they want you to believe. Again, they want you to believe it right out of the gate and with everything else that they say. And then, of course, it's their pompous attitude the entire time of, we're always right, we're never wrong. Donald Trump is always wrong, he's never right, and if you side with him, then you're a fool. So give these individuals a lesson here in 3, 2, 1.
President Trump once again putting false claims about the 2020 election at the center of the national political debate is where we start as we turn tonight to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That's The Atlantic's David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart of MS Now. Good evening, gentlemen. Jeff. So, David, what did you hear in that speech last night? What do you think President Trump is trying to accomplish here?
Oh, subtle. I couldn't figure it out. He was... He's got to get more original in his confabulation. I mean, he's just stuck on this 2020 thing. There's never been any evidence. There's no evidence. I think the good news is he doesn't have any policies to actually ruin our election system, as we heard from the secretaries of state. So we're going to have fair elections in this country. But it still has a corrosive effect on America to give that speech. It's a sign to America that we don't have to weigh evidence here. We don't have to consider what's true or not. And this has been a long Trump story, of course, but I was reminded of a line that used to be in John McCain's campaign speeches in 2000, where he said, a healthy skepticism has turned into a thoroughgoing cynicism about public life. And this is a long-term trend where people think they're all crooks. They're all crooks. It's all rotten. And it's a very easy pose to adopt, but it's a false one. I'm always happy when you have people like Sue Gordon, the intelligence officer, on the show, because Americans get to see what an intelligence officer looks like, what a federal employee looks like, what those two secretaries of state look like. And they are good, honest people doing a professional job because they love their country. And the idea that they're all crooks, it's all deep state, aside from being cynical and corrosive, it's just a lie. We've spent our life covering these people, and it's mostly very good people doing the best they can, not for a lot of money.
Jonathan, why do you think the president is still relitigating this 6 years after the election?
Well, I think he's relitigating it now because, as the kids say, he's scared. He's very scared about what could happen if Democrats retake the House and retake the Senate. I mean, he has said as much on the record. If they take over, I will be investigated. And quite frankly, there are reasons to investigate him and members of his administration. But I thought last night's speech was a complete waste of time. To David's point, it was all a rehash of things we've heard before. And in the end, it was just a rah-rah for his Save America Act, which is going nowhere, not because of the fault of Democrats, but because of Republicans who have problems with that bill. You know, when it comes to the deep state, the thing I kept thinking was, well, wait, if you have problems with the 2020 election and you're blaming it on the deep state, that was your administration. So as much as he did it from the East Room and there was all the pageantry of the presidency, but in the end, I don't think he did himself any favors.
And David, we spoke on this program last night with Ty Cobb, who was the special counsel during the first Trump administration, and he offered an extraordinary warning. He said that he believes that President Trump is laying the predicate for an emergency declaration around the elections. Do you see the guardrails holding if President Trump tries to use the apparatus of the federal government to intervene more directly in how elections are administered?
I think so. A lot of people have thought that this is a predicate for some future action. I think if you look at the things he's tried to do, we're helped by the fact that these are mostly state-run things, so he does not have control, and what isn't state-run is usually congressionally run. And so he has tried, the thing he's done successfully is the gerrymandering in Texas. He has rigged elections, and Democrats have helped in California, so that part he was successful at, and degrading our elections. But pretty much everything else he's done through executive order and other things, courts have overruled him. And so I do not believe he will have the power to actually affect our elections.
How do you see it, John?
Although I am a little concerned about what happens on Election Day. Congressman Jim Himes was on with my colleague Lawrence O'Donnell last night, and he warned that, yes, what the president is doing is laying the predicate for stealing the election. And he said, for instance, what happens if they seize the ballot boxes from particular jurisdictions? What happens to the chain of custody? That is when democracy will be at its most tenuous. And sure, you can race to court and try to get them back, but the action's already done. And so I hope you're right that we're going to have a free and fair election this November, but I have a healthy imagination, and I hope that folks who care about free and fair elections also have a healthy imagination and are prepared for any and every scenario that could happen.
One little quick point. The gentleman from Georgia, the Secretary of State there, he made the crucial point. This does not help Republicans. And in Georgia, if you remember, when there was a runoff for 2 Senate seats a few years ago, Trump basically said, oh, don't bother, it's all rigged. So
Right.
guess what? Republicans sat at home. And that's why Republicans like that gentleman are so upset with what he's doing right now.
I'm going to leave it there and just kind of skip their talk about immigration enforcement. You can take a guess as to how that goes. But again, right out of the gate, you heard exactly what they were saying. They were doing that snide laughter. Well, I just can't believe that they would think this way, and I can't believe that he would continue to say this. He can't be taken seriously. The simple fact that they do that, and the simple fact that they sound that way, is the insulting part. Again, anybody who looks at the evidence knows that the election was stolen. Dead people are voting. These are all of the three-letter agencies, again, within the executive branch, that are openly stating this. And David Brooks goes on some run and says, well, this is what a national security analyst looks like, and this is what this person is supposed to look like, and that matters to the American people. I don't give a shit what anybody looks like. What are the words coming out of their mouth? Do they sound competent? Again, yes, there is a deep state, always has been. Yes, there's always been corruption. No, the vast majority of people in government are not good people. They're either brainwashed, in on the take, or they're good people trying to do the best that they can do. But in Congress alone, just Congress, we're not even talking about three-letter agencies. In Congress, on one hand, you can count the number of honest congressmen or women. Just on one hand. And that alone is being probably far too generous. The overall point here, again, that I'm just trying to make, is that their tone, the way that they say things, the dismissive nature of all of the evidence that exists, that they could look at and examine, they just don't. They're doubling down on their own crime. They're doubling down on their own dismissive nature of evidence that is out in the open. And then, of course, they pass it off as saying, well, he's just using it as some political tool. He's using it as some advantage to not lose the midterms. That's their rationalization. That's their excuse. That's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with the midterm elections. It's July. It's July. We don't vote until November. It has nothing to do with any election taking place this year. It has to do with the fact that they, as a media, were in on it. That their bosses, the CEOs of all of these publishing companies, media outlets, you name it, are in on it, which means to work for those criminal organizations, you have to follow those orders, or like I said earlier, be brainwashed enough to actually believe what you're actually saying and what scripts are being given to you to repeat on television or on the internet so that people just blindly drink it in, if they're dumb enough to actually drink it in. They're in on it. They're not going to admit their own crime. And then, of course, they don't have a counter to that, do they? The PBS station doesn't have a counter argument. They didn't bring somebody in who goes, well, the evidence is rather overwhelming that there's voter fraud. You have dead people voting, illegals voting. This is happening in every single state. It's happening in every county. This is a problem. These voter rolls have to be cleaned up. There's ample video footage of individuals running ballots through machines multiple times. They don't bring any of that up. That's why they are the enemy of the people. They have to be destroyed. These news outlets have to cease to exist. I mean, PBS is right here on YouTube trying to take donations. We've raised a total of $343,161. Well, you're not going to get any donation from me. And why anybody would donate to PBS is astounding to me. But I think that the larger point here is essentially this, is that when you have an outlet like PBS or any outlet, for example, if they told the truth, if they took the time to investigate individually, which they're not allowed to do. Remember, again, if you do an investigation for one of these news organizations and you spend any time on it, you're going to lose your job. The hierarchy that exists within these companies is massive. I mean, you don't get out in front of a camera sitting at a desk wearing a suit and tie and allowed to think for yourself. You just can't do it. You have to do exactly what the people and the script writers tell you what to do and what to read and what to say. But if they actually told the truth and examined the facts and pieced things together and actually engaged in just a thought exercise for once in their miserable lives, again, think of how advanced we would be as an actual society. Crime would plummet. Poverty would disappear. Homelessness would be eradicated. All of these problems that we have would be gone if people just solved the problem. The medical industry is another perfect example, and I know I'm preaching to the choir. Everybody already knows this, but the cure for cancer already exists. It's out there now. Not a single news station, not one, is bringing that up. They're not saying ivermectin, fenbendazole, vitamin B complex, and all the different vitamins and minerals and XYZ, oxygen, menbendazole, I mean, you name them. Zeolite, whatever else. All the stuff that people can take that's over the counter that can cure cancer, not a single news outlet is bringing it up, which means why in the hell would they ever bring up election fraud? This is, again, it's not just communism. It's something that's referred to as socialist realism from a political standpoint, which is what I want to get into now because this is, again, the much larger problem. There are multiple ways in which you can propagandize from an evil aspect. Because as I've said before, propaganda isn't a bad word. There's good propaganda and there's evil propaganda. But back in the day, certainly in the 1920s, 1930s, etc., when, again, Lenin and Stalin and endless communists, Jewish of course, were all doing what they were doing. They were always trying to portray what they were doing in a positive light, knowing full well that it wasn't. Again, they didn't have the media outlets that we have today. They didn't have television. They had, of course, radio broadcasts and things of that nature. They had the print media, but that was generally it. And people, of course, can debate back and forth as to whether or not it was easier back then to brainwash people or it's easier today. I personally think, again, that the brainwashing is one of those things that's always going to exist. There's just always going to be a percentage of the population worldwide that does not want to believe the truth. They don't want to look into it. They don't want to realize that the things that they grew up reading, listening to, seeing, hearing about, whatever, is actually not true. Certainly if it came by way of current media, like, again, radio, television, internet, things of that nature. I say internet broadly. We know that the truth exists on the internet in multiple forms, but again, you have to look for it. The positive part about what's going on now, though, is that you don't have to look very far. You can easily make 2 clicks and watch something for 2 hours that's completely worthless. Or you can make 2 clicks in a different direction and spend 2 hours watching or listening to something that is telling you the exact opposite of the thing that you've believed your entire life with evidence. That the thing that you've believed your entire life isn't real. I want to read this 4chan post. This is from 4 years ago. And as I'm reading this, I want you to think about, again, that audio clip that you just heard. Because as I said earlier, it's about humiliating you. Again, gaslighting is ritualistic humiliation in its own right. And it's psychological abuse. So here's what the 4chan post said. It said, quote, "The purpose of propaganda, at least in its late-stage form, is not to inform you or deceive you or even manipulate you. It's to humiliate you. Its purpose is to be so outlandish, so ridiculous, and so blatantly untrue, and yet totally undeniable in order to reinforce the power of the state. The Soviets referred to this as hyperrealism. That is, the state of everyone saying things that are completely false and that they know to be false, but which they cannot deny. The supermarket shelves are empty and bread lines stretch around the corner, but the newspapers report that the year's agricultural quotas have been exceeded once again. And then everyone is forced to repeat this lie, and thus they become complicit in it. It is a system of total social humiliation and control." Now, when I read that out loud also, I not only think about, of course, what they were saying regarding Donald Trump's speech on election fraud, which again, there is election fraud. Joe Biden was not the lawful president of the United States. It's beyond obvious. But I also think about endless other things, again, regarding the COVID lie. And one point specifically, which is something I've brought up on the show tons of times, it had to do with college enrollment numbers. That was a perfect form of humiliation, ritualistic humiliation and gaslighting. colleges and universities and K-12 schools were telling you that their enrollment was through the roof. Bullshit. It wasn't. People were leaving colleges and universities in droves. They were seeing the way that these students were being controlled. The parents were seeing the way that these students were being controlled. All the different things that they were being told to do, wear the mask, stand here, test yourself, blah, blah, blah. All for nothing. The number of students on college campuses that were arrested for congregating on their own property that they were renting from someone else, even in the town where I live, all for nothing, because of nothing. Now here's where the Post gets something a little bit historically wrong. Hyperrealism has more to do with the artistic approach back then in the Soviet times, in the communistic Soviet times of, again, the 1920s, 30s, etc., certainly through the 1980s, where the imagery specifically that people were shown was being shown to depict communism as being a positive thing. It was purposeful. Painters were doing it. Muralists were doing it, if muralist is a word. People who would paint murals. And all of those giant posters that, again, individuals would see. A big bright sunshine and children all dressed exactly the same. And, a child on Stalin's lap. And it doesn't get any more safer than this. And look at the muscles and the chiseled people and the hard work and all of that other stuff. Again, that's all purpose-driven. It just so happens, though, that it's the exact opposite of what people were actually experiencing. They were experiencing starvation, rape, murder, all of it. That's what they were really experiencing. But what was being portrayed in the imagery back then, because the imagery was a part of the media, it was a part of the way that you got a message across, where you wanted to, of course, brainwash and control people into normalizing their current state of affairs. That's exactly how they would do it. But it wasn't an accurate description. It was the exact opposite. So instead of hyperrealism with regard to artwork, for example, you had specifically regarding propaganda what was referred to as socialist realism. And here's a little breakdown of this with some of the descriptions here. It says socialist realism was formalized at the 1934 Soviet Writers' Congress and enforced as the only acceptable style across painting, sculpture, literature, posters, and more. Its core directive was to depict reality in its revolutionary development, quote unquote, meaning not objective truth, but an idealized, optimistic version of Soviet life aligned with Marxist-Leninist ideology. Case in point, what David Brooks just said. He rolls his eyes, he drops his head, and he goes, but don't worry, we're going to have safe elections. We're going to have honest elections because we always do. Again, him saying it is a perfect example of socialist realism. He's trying to tell you what he believes to be real. Whether he really believes it or not is anybody's guess. But by him saying it on that platform, he's trying to get people to just blindly drink it in. Here are some of the key traits of socialist realism. Naturalistic academic techniques produced highly detailed, back then anyway, and certainly even today, truthful quote-unquote renderings of muscular women, heroic peasants, smiling collectives, industrial triumphs, and cult of personality portraits, for example, like Stalin. And then scenes overflowed with sunlight, youth, technology, and abundance. Tragedy, poverty, or criticism were banned or reframed as relics of the past. Exactly what David Brooks and his gay cohort openly said on that PBS show. I can't believe he's bringing this up 6 years later. Him alluding to it 6 years ago was ridiculous, but now bringing it up 6 years later is equally, if not more, ridiculous. So again, as far as they're concerned, what happened in the past is irrelevant. Don't think for yourself. Don't think about the past. What's happening now is the only thing that you should pay attention to, and what we say is the only thing that matters, and don't bother thinking about what happens in the future. Don't even think about it, because you shouldn't even think into the future about anything at all. Again, that's communistic, 100%. The propaganda purpose of socialist realism, specifically again regarding art, it says that art became engineering of souls, which was Stalin's phrase, It specifically promoted party-mindedness, ideological content, and the, quote, new Soviet man. Posters, murals, and paintings functioned as mass agitation tools, visible everywhere from factories to metro stations, to instill loyalty, justify purges, collectivization, and later the Great Patriotic War effort. The evil aspects of it systematically distorted reality. Famines, for example, the Holodomor, and yes, the AI system here, Grok, brought up the Holodomor. Gulags, repression, and everyday hardships vanished. Artists faced censorship, exile, or worse for deviation, labeled formalism, and it served communistic totalitarianism, turning culture into a weapon of conformity and erasure. Again, this is what every working environment, by and large, in America does unless you work for yourself. If you work in the schooling system and you deviate from what the schooling system, again, tells you to do, then you're out. Same thing in the private sector. If you again work for a media outlet and you deviate from what the general conversation or the so-called general debate is. That's why I find those debate shows to be even funny, because even those debate shows are limited in what subjects get brought up. Again, they never bring up genocide. They never bring up Israel's crimes. They never bring up anything from the past, the lies of 9/11, a million things. They never bring up any of this because they're controlled. It's always formed around ultimate control. And if you deviate from that control, what do you think happens to their employment? It disappears. They get fired. It's that simple. So you have all of these like-minded people, again, just talking in an echo chamber on a constant basis. I fully understand, again, that what I'm saying is repetitive. I mean, I get it. I'm preaching to the choir here. You already know this. I'm just simply saying that by doing what they're doing, they're proving to everybody on a day in and day out basis that they are the enemy. Take the wildfires in Canada, for example. Okay, there's quote-unquote wildfires in Canada. Are they wildfires or is it arson? Think of the timing of all of it. You had the World Cup games going on in the United States. You have Canada claiming climate change problems, quote unquote. You have documentation that's been released by the United States government proving that climate change is a lie. It's an entire money laundering hoax. And then all of a sudden, some forests in Canada get set ablaze, but they don't frame it as arson. They say, well, this is an unfortunate circumstance, and yes, this rarely happens in XYZ. Well, again, there are forest fires all of the time. I'm not saying that they can't just immediately start without human intervention. I mean, they can, but most of it's arson, most of the time. And it doesn't take very long to start one, let alone have one spread. You add the argument of data centers, of course, and needing massive amounts of land for data centers. See, this is the level of thinking that a David Brooks, no relation, of course, and his gay cohort over there at PBS don't want to think about, because there's no such thing as a conspiracy. There's no such things as more than two people getting together to break a law and think multiple dimensions about scheming something and breaking a law to then, of course, control something else in the future. They think that this is completely impossible, that such things never, ever occur. It's foolish. It's beyond foolish. But again, that's the gatekeeping, and that's the control apparatus that exists because the solution is not profitable. Case in point, take illegal aliens. What should happen with every illegal alien? They should be deported. And they should never be allowed to re-enter our country ever again. That's the solution to that problem. But when the solution, again, gets brought up to individuals who perpetuate the problem and make a living on perpetuating the problem, those individuals get to make money, while the illegal aliens, of course, get to make money and get to stay. Or they self-deport, like, again, thankfully they have apparently done in Springfield, Ohio. A lot of the Haitians have just up and left, which is good. Where did they go? I have no idea. But many have left Springfield, Ohio, and that's, again, a very good thing. But when law enforcement tries to step in and enforce the law and get rid of the problem, the people who again make money on perpetuating the problem, they start complaining. Which is why the people who are trying to solve the problem have to find another way to try to solve the problem and use legal means in order to do it. Let me read this very quickly. Keep in mind it was from Axios, but it's a decent summary of this. This has to do with the Alien Terrorist Removal Court. This is a real thing. It's rarely been used, but it does exist. It was titled Trump's DOJ New Deportation Path, a never-before-used court. It says the Justice Department is asking a never-before-used federal court to remove an unnamed non-citizen, the first use of a 30-year-old process that could give President Trump a new tool for his deportation agenda. Again, that entire paragraph is written by a communist. Unnamed non-citizen. They shouldn't even be going through a court. They should just be deported because they're not a citizen. And then, of course, they call it President Trump's deportation agenda. No. Deportation should be the thing that happens to all non-citizens because that's the answer to the problem. It says why it matters. If the Justice Department wins, it could remove people it links to terrorism while keeping much of its evidence secret. Well, yeah. If they're tied to terrorism, then it would have to be secret so that it could be investigated by real investigators. It goes on, it says, a loss could show why this court sat idle for 30 years. The law may demand more than the government wants to provide. It says the DOJ filed the first application in the Alien Terrorist Removal Court's history last Wednesday. The one-page filing does not name the person, the alleged conduct, or the part of the anti-terrorism law the department cited. Chief Judge Joan N. Eckerson, who heard arguments Thursday, questioned the connection between the person's alleged actions and the law. She ordered the government to provide more facts and legal analysis by Wednesday. The White House referred requests for comment to the Justice Department, which did not respond. Well, it shouldn't, because it doesn't have to. It says, in private, one judge decides if there is probable cause. At the public hearing, DOJ must show that it is more likely than not that the person meets the law's definition of an alien terrorist. Even in public, the person faces removal, and the public does not have the right to see classified evidence. Well, it's classified, so we shouldn't see it. But the DOJ must provide an unclassified summary. Congress created the 5-judge court in 1996 for cases when ordinary immigration proceedings could expose classified information and threaten national security. It says the definition of a terrorist covers non-citizens who carried out or are likely to carry out terrorist activity. It also includes those who incite or endorse terrorism, represent or belong to certain terrorist groups, or receive military-type training from them. Normal federal evidence rules don't apply. The law explicitly allows the U.S. to use illegally obtained evidence. Well, evidence is evidence any way you slice it. And again, they're a non-citizen. So if they're a non-citizen and they're suspected of, again, breaking a law in our country, then yeah, I don't care what you call them, just get rid of them. Now here's the suspicious part, and I think this is where Israel is involved. It says the DOJ considered 100 possible cases by 2000 and rejected all of them, according to a 9/11 Commission staff report. Officials found ordinary immigration charges sufficient, the report says. Interesting. Again, 100 cases by the year 2000 and they were all rejected. Why? Because they're Israeli? Because they're here illegally? And possibly engaging in terroristic acts or going to engage in such acts? It says Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act in 2025 to remove Venezuelans his administration accused of belonging to Tren de Aragua. The Supreme Court ruled that people targeted under the law must receive notice and a chance to challenge their removal. During that litigation, Chief Judge James Boasberg, that guy every single time, of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia pointed DOJ to the Alien Terrorist Removal Court. Congress has an answer for us, doesn't it? Boasberg said, because they created the Alien Terrorist Removal Court. So again, this is interesting. If Boasberg, who is dirtier than a bag of shit, if he himself brought this up, and the Trump administration is then going down this avenue, is he doing it because he believes that this court is going to do the right thing, or is he doing it to expose how corrupt this court actually is when it comes to enforcing the law? Your guess is as good as mine. It could be, again, a bit of both, but time will tell. But again, the solution to this problem of illegal immigration and illegals existing here in the United States and breaking the law, and then, of course, being let out on the streets again to then kill, rape, you name it, steal, all the crimes that they engage in. The solution is remarkably simple. But when you have endless individuals within these organizations, the deep state that David Brooks and his gay cohort don't want to talk about and don't want to acknowledge and say doesn't exist, all of those individuals doing all of that to cover for these crimes, that's the problem. And the solution is remarkably simple. You arrest these people. But again, if they were alluding to some national security event that Donald Trump gets to invoke as the head of the executive branch in the future, I say do it. Do it. We've been clamoring for the emergency broadcast system to kick in, where, again, either martial law takes over or something. But at this stage of the game, again, I don't think we can vote our way out of this anymore. Something else has to happen. There are endless laws that could be followed by the executive branch and moves that could be made that could clean up this country swiftly and justly. There's also this, and I wanted to make mention of this too, because, again, I've brought this up on the show before, the business of Cuba and how Cuba is one of these countries, again, that's always been a deep state hotbed for a variety of reasons. It's not just a communist state and a poor country, but again, it's a CIA Mossad playground and always has been. But with that in mind, just because Cuba gets brought up doesn't mean that, of course, Israel isn't involved. They are involved. All of these locations where we've been bombing or there's conflict, Israel has a hand in all of it. And I think, again, a thinking person fully understands that. But one of the things that's happening, which I think is rather interesting, certainly from a historic standpoint, and we're just living through history, is that a lot of these Israeli playgrounds are being dismantled one country at a time. Venezuela, Iran, and of course, the target is now set on Cuba, and rightfully so. Of course, the city of London, the banking system, all of it. These are all the different cookie jars that Israel has always had their hands in. And their, again, intelligence apparatus has always had their hands in. Same thing with ours. Same thing with our deep state. This post, again, is from Observing Consciousness. I like a lot of their content, which is why I read some of it on the show from time to time. But here's what they said again regarding Cuba and how, of course, this is sort of the consistent conversation that's starting to take place now. Cuba was never acting alone, they said. Havana functioned as the Western Hemisphere command node inside a much larger global architecture. Moscow supplied strategic depth, intelligence, tradecraft, and military alignment. Beijing supplied technology, surveillance, communications, infrastructure, and geopolitical protection. Tehran expanded the militant energy and sanctions evasion corridors. Caracas supplied oil, territory, state infrastructure, and regional sustainment. Then the City of London supplied another essential layer, the financial circuitry. Global networks do not survive on ideology and intelligence alone. They require capital routing, offshore structures, legal shielding, banking access, insurance, trade finance, and institutional protection, capable of moving power across borders while separating the money from the mission. That is where the architecture becomes complete. Cuba trains, recruits, penetrates, and organizes. Venezuela resources and sustains. Russia and China reinforce, coordinate, and protect. Iran extends the illicit and militant access, while the City of London represents the transitional financial layer through which wealth, influence, and operational continuity can be preserved behind the appearance of legitimate commerce. Then the system reaches inward. Through intelligence assets, diplomatic channels, universities, media, NGOs, activist fronts, political movements, corporate structures, and institutional access points. Foreign-directed pressure is converted into domestic agitation, imported ideology is made to appear organic, and a coordinated international system begins operating under the illusion of disconnected local movements. That is the greater map. Cuba was the regional relay. Moscow and Beijing supplied strategic power, Tehran and Caracas supplied operational corridors, the City of London supplied financial reach and insulation, and domestic assets opened the doors from the inside. The State Department is not merely exposing an island, it is identifying one command node inside a transitional system built to weaken American sovereignty, fracture social cohesion, penetrate institutions, and redirect the nation through pressure applied from both outside and within. So my question to you is, what countries do you think are next? I would go so far as to say Mexico. What about Canada? These, of course, have been problematic countries for a very long time for very different reasons. You have a lot of Chinese influence, of course, in Canada. There might be some, of course, in Mexico, certainly when it comes to certain drug recipes, we'll say, and the additives that are put in particular drugs, and then, of course, the Mexican cartels and the things that they do. But you're also seeing in South America a shift in their politics down there as well. I think in a more positive direction than what it's been in the past. Not saying that there isn't some nefarious Jewish influence there too. There probably is, and there certainly seems to be, and there's evidence that points in that direction. But again, with the gatekeepers in the media, they'll never bring up the question of why, and then they'll never answer that question. Again, they don't look at the evidence. They don't think. They just look at Iran and they go, well, we're at war with Iran because of no nuclear weapon. And then, of course, now they're saying, well, what about Cuba? I don't understand, but let's not answer that question. They aren't seeing, again, that we are controlling a great deal of what's really going on around the world right now. And we're not doing it alone. I think there are plenty of Middle Eastern countries that are doing this, and as it's been said before, saving Israel for last. By taking away all their playgrounds, where's Israel going to play? I know that they're still playing here in the United States regarding our politics. You talk about foreign interference. Yes, of course, it's Israel within our own politicians. I mean, I get that, and a lot of people get that. But what if that's the last move? What if the last move is getting rid of all of that? That would be fantastic too. So yeah, I'm kind of hopeful in that regard that a lot of these things are going to change in the future and we're going to see a lot of this change. But again, going after these particular countries the way that this administration and this military has gone after them, it's not an accident. We're not just picking a random person on behalf of Israel and saying, well, it's another Jew war. Or, it's because Netanyahu wants us to do this. I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, hell, Israel has been exposed over the last, I'd say, 6 years rather solidly, have they not? And once people, of course, have waken up to all of this and who the real enemies of the real world really are, you don't take your eyes off it. It only amplifies itself over the course of time. So that's it for geopolitics, basically, at least for this particular episode. I do want to mention this as well, though, and this is kind of in the same vein. Certainly has to do with gatekeeping. And one of the other avenues, of course, where gatekeeping takes place is the education business. Now, what I'm going to say next, I know is going to sound like criticism of people. It's not so much people, because I think that they're the pawns in this game. And of course, they're favored for some reason, like they have some, intellectual clout of some kind. But it has to do, again, with the gatekeeping that takes place, again, within the education business, and it's their behavior that is the most alarming for me. Because as I said earlier, the solution to our problems, in particular, again, regarding education, are simple. You see, all of these education gatekeepers, and I'm going to mention a great deal of them here, or at least a few, because these individuals, again, tend to be conservatives. You've heard me mention their names before on the show, and I'm not a fan of them. The Chris Rufos of the world, the Corey DeAngelises of the world, Libs of TikTok, Prager University, etc., etc. The list is endless. But what these individuals do is they consistently profit, not on experience. And they're not profiting from their own experience, and they're not even, again, highlighting their own experience within the education business, because many of them have never been educators. Shia Ratchik, I believe, who was, of course, Libs of TikTok, I think she was an elementary school educator for quite some time. But either way, she's promoted because she has a particular product that she sells, which of course is the, whatever you would want to call it, the liberal hive mind maxing behavior of all of the gay agenda and corruption and everything else that does exist. I'm not saying it isn't beneficial. It most certainly is. But what is the real answer? What is the real answer to, again, the American education system? How do you destroy it? You can't reform it. You can't change it. That's what a lot of those so-called education gatekeepers and influencers would lead people to believe, that it can be changed for the better. It can't. The entire reason that quote-unquote school choice is a conversation to begin with and an option is because that's the best option. And everybody knows, again, ultimately your choice is the following: independent learning within the safety of your own home or government intervention. So of those two, which is the healthiest one? It's not government intervention. It's not government control. It's not a different government school for my kid because the one government school sucked, so let me move them to a different government school. That isn't the answer. The answer is independent learning as an individual in a quiet environment on your own at your own pace. So let me give you a few examples as to, again, why these individuals will never mention homeschooling, and they never do. And they also never bring up how cheap it is and how easy it is to sign up and just actually do it. Corey DeAngelis over there on X right now, if you get over on his X page, he basically went through the entire American Federation of Teachers conference, that entire radical teachers union conference, and he dissected it as best he could, so he thinks, and highlighted the ridiculous nature of their agenda and XYZ. That's beyond obvious at this point. He even shows up and gives particular speeches where he says, we're going to take down the unions, and we have to do this, and we have to do that, and let's encourage people to leave the unions and encourage all these teachers to leave the unions. Well, that should go without saying. Teachers who pay into unions are paying for their own slavery. They're paying for their own brainwashing. It's the illusion of protection. Because it isn't really protection. It's political persuasion. They're being told how to behave politically. And the individuals who are following a union and chanting the same things that a union is telling them to chant, those people are too far gone. But you're never going to destroy the unions because you're always going to have individuals brainwashed enough to work in the business and pay into a union, which means a union is always going to exist. This is why Corey DeAngelis, in my opinion, is a gatekeeper in the education field. Because he doesn't give you the solution. Because again, if he gave you the solution, he'd be out of a job. So he has to perpetuate the problem by highlighting the problem consistently without ever answering the question and solving the problem. This is, of course, my problem with those kinds of people. So let me give you a quick example as to how easy it is to break away from the government system of education and actually have your children learn at home in the safety of their own home for next to nothing. Now, as you're well aware, and I've brought this individual up before on this show and the Dangerous Info podcast, but the mother of the child who was, in my opinion, sexually assaulted by Jason Mers, the principal, former principal now, of Kramer Elementary School in the Talawanda City School District in Oxford, Ohio, who is unfortunately now the principal of the middle school. God only knows why. But the mother has decided to homeschool her two children, and she has withdrawn her children formally from the school district. And in the state of Ohio, all you have to do is you have to email the superintendent of the school district and tell them that you are homeschooling your children. You don't have to tell them what subjects you're teaching them. You can if you want. You don't have to tell them what program you're using. You just have to say, formally unenroll my children for the 26-27 school year. And then that's it. Once they're in receipt of your email, then it's official. They have to, of course, respond to you so that you have a receipt of their response. But that's how easy it is in the state of Ohio. That's how easy it should be everywhere. Unfortunately, what you have to do, which I wish would be a move that would be abolished, is that every year you have to tell the public school in the zip code where you live that you are homeschooling, or else they will automatically enroll you and your children, rather, just based on, again, your address and your zip code. Because they look up all the addresses, all the zip codes that have children, and then they just automatically enroll them with or without your knowledge or permission. So you have to tell them well in advance that you're going to be homeschooling their kids. Now, there's a little aspect of this that is important. I recommend personally that if an individual homeschools their children and you have to notify the public school in the area where you live that you're homeschooling your children, that you do that in the spring. In the very early spring months, before, again, they start to re-enroll children or whatever, you immediately tell the school district that you're going to be homeschooling your children for the next year, for the entire next year. This way, the school can't lock in the state money from those children being automatically enrolled to then, of course, be unenrolled later on. I hope that makes sense. Basically, if you're going to homeschool and you want to take away those funds that are associated with your children being enrolled in your local public school, the best time to unenroll them to ensure that the public school does not receive your money is usually the month of January. And you email the superintendent in January telling them that that next school year you're homeschooling, whether you're already doing it or you're not. You indicate to them in January that the following year, the following school year when it starts, whether it be, again, August or whenever, of course, in the state of Ohio, you have to basically let the school district know by August 30th. But if you want to make sure that the school doesn't receive money, as if, again, your children were still enrolled or going to be enrolled, because that's what they do, the school districts always anticipate, even if you're homeschooling, that you're going to re-enroll them in the public school system. They do that, and then they add your children's name to the roster for funding, for state funding. So to ensure that that doesn't happen, you unenroll them every January. You make sure and send an email every January to the school superintendent, the district superintendent, telling them that that following school year you're homeschooling. And then the next January comes around and you do the exact same thing again. This is what Corey DeAngelis doesn't tell people. This is how you stick it to the man. So by this mother homeschooling her children, unfortunately, the money has already been locked in for the school district, so the school district's already going to receive thousands of dollars as if her children were already enrolled, even though they aren't. But the state will lose tens of thousands of dollars. And then if she homeschools again next year, which she will, and sends the email this time in January instead of July like she did this year, what will end up happening is the school district will lose the money of those children, and so will the state. This is how you win. This is how you bankrupt the education system. Again, it blows me away, and you've heard me say it a million times, and I'll say it a million more, why any parent or any child wakes up early in the morning, gets dressed, puts all the shit in a backpack, gets on a bus, goes to school, or gets dropped off by a parent, to be indoctrinated for 8 hours a day, worry about shit that doesn't matter, and then come home, and then do stuff at home that is also school-related, to then only go back the very next day and do it all over again, and do this 5 days a week, 180 days a year. Let me tell you how simple and cheap it is, specifically using Abeka, which again is a Christian homeschooling accredited K-12 school. If you go over to Abeka.com and you hover your mouse cursor over homeschool, you'll see 4 separate categories. It says Homeschool, Parent-Led, Abeka Academy Resources. The Abeka Academy is the accredited institution. When you click on that, the overview portion, the very first screen that pops up, it says Abeka Academy Video Homeschool. And then you click Shop Abeka Academy. Then it shows you the different grades. It says K4, K5, which is like preschool, kindergarten. And then it says grade 1 video, grade 2 video, grade 3, and then it goes all the way through every single grade, all the way through grade 12. All you do is click on one of those. I'll click on grade 6 just for fun. And it shows you the price range. And then it gives you an enrollment period. Do you want to do it for one semester or a full year? Now, just for a price comparison here, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to run right through this for a full year and show you exactly what this would cost and how you can actually pay for this and how cheap it is. You click for a full year, and then it immediately shows you again what you'll pay per month, because you can pay per month. You can pay all up front if you want, or you can just pay per month. Full year. Then it says materials. Do you want videos and books or just videos alone? Well, videos and books, please. How about the media type? Do you want a video streaming these particular lessons, or do you want them on DVDs? It's completely your choice, but I'll pick video streaming. Then which program option do you want? Do you want the accredited one or the independent study, which is unaccredited? We want the accredited one because when we graduate, we want a real diploma that counts just like a public school diploma does or a private school diploma does. And then that's it. Full year, video books, video streaming, accredited. One student, 6th grade, $152.70 a month for 10 months. That's it. Most families in America who send their children to public school spend way more per year sending their children to a quote-unquote free public school than they would if they just had their child learn within the confines of their own home. You don't need a computer. You don't need a printer. I mean, it would, of course, help to have those things, just to be literate in how to use those pieces of technology for obvious reasons, but you don't need all of that right out of the gate. In particular, if you're in elementary school. It's all within the books and the videos that show up at your front door 1 week after you make the purchase. Before you make the purchase, of course, you create an account. You log in, you create your own account. That's done in less than 5 minutes. You type in your name, your address, your phone number, your email, and then you have an account. Then again, you buy your grade level materials, one purchase, that's it, and then you're done. That's how easy it is. That's how simple it is to receive an objective education from real educators via video streaming with books in front of you that will take maybe a couple hours a day. And then, of course, depending on how quick someone learns, they can do way more than that. Hell, you can probably run through the entire year curriculum depending on how fast a child learns and how fast a child, retains information and can be assessed on that information. And of course, the parent does the assessing, that the individual, again, just grades the material. And there's, I don't think, anything keeping them from going back and learning more material as they go along. And then you send, apparently, the information back to Abeka through the snail mail. And then they, of course, keep a record of all of your information. But again, this isn't being explained to people. I mean, there's videos on YouTube that explain it in detail. But at the same time, the Corey DeAngelises of the world, the libs of TikTok of the world, the PragerUs of the world, they aren't telling you that this already exists. You can whine about the unions all you want. You can scream about school choice all you want. But then there's actually just doing it and bankrupting the system. And that's the real answer. But again, like I said, that's not profitable. They have to consistently complain about the education business rather than just pointing people to what the actual answer is. Let me give you another example. I like this particular blog over here, Chatboard, certainly when it comes to the subreddit of Reddit teachers. I want to read this scenario here that I came across just the other day. It's sad and it's pathetic for a variety of reasons. But there's one answer to this solution here. There's one answer, rather, to this problem that you're going to hear this female teacher, so to speak, actually describe. And they are, again, a first year, you gotta swallow this one. They're a first year elementary school physical education teacher, female. So here's what it was titled. First year PE teacher, and then it says internal transfer blocked after principal wanted to hire me. Human resources told me, quote, I don't have sympathy for you, unquote. What would you do? Now here's her scenario. I'm a first-year elementary PE teacher, and I honestly don't know what to do. I work as a PE2 teacher, meaning I co-teach with our PE1 teacher. We are equal teachers, but I just go to a different school one day of the week. From the beginning of the school year, I've had ongoing issues with our working relationship. The other person that she works with is apparently an older male. She said some examples: being yelled at by my co-teacher and belittled in front of the kids, that I need to go away and worry about other things. He would restart activities after I had already explained them because he wanted to explain them himself. He would interrupt me while I was teaching. He would take over lessons I was leading. If students misbehaved during my class, he would step in instead of allowing me to handle classroom management myself. Please understand that I know I may seem like this is just a situation where I don't know what I'm doing, but I promise I can do this job. My co-teacher is a big control freak who not only disrespects me, but our students. As a first-year teacher, I felt like I was viewed more as an assistant than an equal teacher. I tried to make it work all year because I didn't want to be the first-year teacher who complained. I talked with multiple people throughout the year, but never filed a formal HR complaint. By March, I had started applying for internal PE positions because I knew I needed a different environment. Eventually, a PE position opened at another elementary school a few weeks ago. I interviewed, and the principal there wanted to hire me. HR was contacted to move forward. Then I found out my current principal would not release me due to the school year starting in a month. This is the part that has been so difficult for me to understand. My current school already has a PE1 teacher. I'm the PE2 teacher. The school that wanted me didn't have a PE teacher in that position yet. I was the only applicant who had been in the district and knew how things ran. From my perspective, it seemed like moving me would have filled a vacancy while my current school would still have their PE1, who already runs the program and does the majority of the planning and organization, doesn't allow me to plan anything anyway. Before contacting HR myself, I went to my union. They reached out to both HR and my principal to see if anything could be done about the transfer. After that, I spoke with HR. Instead of feeling supported, I left the conversation feeling worse than before. Well, that's what HR departments do. They belittle people. Remember, they protect the employer, not the employee. They went on. I said I was repeatedly asked why I hadn't tried transferring sooner and why I hadn't brought my concerns to HR sooner. That's exactly what they would say. I explained that I had been applying since March and that this particular position didn't become available until much later. I was also asked why I had never made an official HR complaint even though I talked with multiple people throughout the year. During that conversation, HR told me, quote, "I don't have sympathy for you," unquote. I was also told there were concerns about me as a teacher and that HR didn't believe I had actually been experiencing the issues I described at my school. That, too, is what HR would tell people. Again, they don't protect the employee. It says, I left feeling like I had to defend myself instead of being heard. I then emailed my principal respectfully asking if she would reconsider releasing me, but nothing has changed. Now I'm expected to go back to the same environment after everyone knows I tried to leave. The hardest part is that I genuinely don't think I can mentally do another year there. I loved the kids, but I would dread going to work and cry after school most days because of how I was treated. My union even told me that if a doctor determines my work environment is affecting my health, I may have options for being released from my contract for medical reasons. Again, unions and their excuses. It's incredible. She goes on and finishes up here and says, if money weren't a factor, I wouldn't go back. I love teaching. I don't want to leave education. I just don't think I can stay in this particular situation. So I guess my questions are, would you stay and try and make it work, or would you leave? If you were in my position, what would you do? Is there anything else I should be doing before making a final decision? I'm honestly just looking for advice from people who have been through something similar because I feel completely stuck, unquote. The first person responded that got the most positive responses was the following. They said, the economy is terrible. For that reason, I would stay until I had another job lined up, but I would apply to every district around the current district immediately. And then they said, thanks, I'll take that advice, whatever else. Again, this is the problem, and I'm going to provide the solution. Yes, they can maintain their employment and be miserable in their employment. Again, this is how shitty the business is. She literally has the easiest job in the field of education. It's elementary physical education. And all it takes is one asshole coworker to ruin it. Again, no offense, but here comes the offensive part. If you're an elementary PE teacher, you're probably not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Again, she's a female. She loves kids. She's playing right into her maternal instincts. I get it. She probably wants to be a mother. I hope she does anyway. But that's probably why, again, she chose the profession. Not to mention, again, it's not exactly rocket science. She's not building lessons like other school teachers are. I mean, it's the rules of T-ball. Things like that. Not even the rules. It's just, let's play T-ball. Or let's go outside and run around for a while. So it's not like it's a difficult job, but her situation proves that it's the people in the job, the bureaucracy in the job, human resources, unions, principals, administration, the hierarchy. That's what's wrong with the entire profession. It's the adults. The adults are the problem. Yes, the students can be the problem too. That's sometimes, of course, a reflection of their home environment, of the lack of manners, sociopathology, 1,000 other things that they have wrong with them. But we're talking about an elementary school PE teacher. Again, if they want to remain in the profession, then yeah, they should find another PE job in a neighboring district if they can. Or they should just leave the entire profession. Because it isn't going to get better with time. It's going to get worse for her. Now that she can see what the business is capable of regarding her position and how easy of a move that would make, if she thought that the education business made logical choices, she thought wrong. You could hand the entire business world peace on a silver platter and they would flip it over in front of your face. That's how the business operates. It is not logical. It is very illogical all of the time. And it will get worse for her the longer she stays in the business. It will not get better. So again, this is what the Corey DeAngelises of the world do not tell people. These are the solutions that they do not provide. Don't enter the business. Homeschool your children using another curriculum. This is how you bankrupt the business. And again, it doesn't mean that the business can't exist in some states or some areas. But you can fold entire school districts overnight with your lack of participation. You've heard me say again 11%. If 11% of the current population stops going, or they see a 11% decline in enrollment, the school district will fold. They can't keep the lights on. All the gay bullshit will start to go away a little at a time, but it won't matter because you're not there anyway because you're not participating. This is just a line of work that has to cease to exist. I'm not sure how else I can put it. But I do want to play this because this is another reason why the business needs to cease to exist. There is a behavior that exists within this business that many of us are well versed in, and it has to do, of course, with pedophiles hiring pedophiles, and abusers hiring abusers, and gays hiring gays, and people of certain political persuasions hiring those who have the same political persuasions. Which is, again, why white, straight, confident, knowledgeable Christian men typically don't enter this business. And if they do, they enter it to try to fix it, like me. But we have a lifespan in the business because the business doesn't want people like that around. This particular video is making the rounds. Again, it's about 24 hours long is all. It's over on YouTube. And it describes, again, in just 6 minutes, why is it that pedophiles find their way into particular positions of power. But I want you to keep something in mind here. It's not just pedophiles. This video is honed in on pedophiles and individuals who are sexual predators. But it can be anybody who, again, has a particular persuasion, whether that be political or otherwise. And why is it, again, that they not only enter these particular positions of power, but they maintain them and stay in them and are given basically endless excuses to stick around and a leg up and a hand out? This is from the YouTube channel Basic Logic. It was titled, "Why Do Pedophiles Keep Getting Into Power?" Give this a listen. It's only 6 minutes long. In 3, 2, 1.
Many of us were shocked by certain recent events that revealed an uncanny relationship between power and depravity. But when we study history, we find that this isn't a one-off conspiracy theory, but rather a consistent pattern. We have writings on this exact matter all the way back to the ancient Greeks, and it has been a continued blight ever since. While they are rarely the majority of political leaders, as this condition is relatively rare, pedophile networks have consistently and cross-culturally clawed their way into positions of power. And in this video, we explore the mechanisms behind it. And if you enjoyed, consider subscribing. It helps the channel. I'll assume you're already acquainted with recent happenings. To understand how they keep getting into positions of power, we must first answer why they'd even want to. And the answer to this is straightforward. To satisfy their depravity, they need power. Thus, their drive for power far exceeds regular individuals. Abusing children is not a crime that is easy to hide. And abusers are rarely satisfied with one-off experiences. They want repeats, which carry immense risk. And put bluntly, there are logistical challenges. Trafficking victims, providing for them, making sure word doesn't get out, all requires incredible effort and discretion. Expertise that often exceeds the capabilities of lone actors. So they need a network, both to make it happen and to protect them from consequences. Understand, prolific pedophiles don't act alone. They're driven to band together and co-conspire. Anecdotally, prison guards often report how it seems child abusers can't shut up about their crimes and won't stop talking about it with each other. The issue is, finding co-conspirators in the open can be difficult, because there are obvious risks involved in advertising your condition. Recently, another YouTuber and I got some attention after we argued in favor of severe punishment against all pedophile communities, even the ones that describe themselves as no contact. These no-contact communities claim that they are just a support group for people struggling with the condition. But in practice, we've seen how they are just a bridge for pedophiles to build up connections and share CP, while trying to normalize themselves to broader society. In my view, those who have this depravity have no good reason to advertise it. Even if some are sincere and there are individuals who genuinely use these no-contact communities similarly to how others use AA meetings, the risk clearly far outweighs the benefit. The only ones with whom it may be reasonable to share is a priest in case of confessions or a psychiatrist, and even that has historically opened the door towards abuse. But desire for power alone doesn't give someone the reins of power. On top of their drive, they have specific advantages over normal people. We've already addressed their network formation. Once pedophiles co-conspire, betrayal is mutually assured destruction, as they both have blackmail on each other, guaranteeing loyalty. There's a strange irony here, because since loyalty is ensured by the threat of exposing their crimes, the ones who've been least engaged in the crimes are the ones who have the most leverage, and therefore get to dictate terms to the rest of the network. Meaning the true leader of a pedophile network is almost never himself a pedophile, but instead just an eager recruiter, knowing that he can ensure their absolute loyalty with a carrot and stick approach, satisfying their depravity being the carrot and exposing them the stick. In this way, pedophile networks are unmatched in their cohesion, drive, group loyalty, and obedience. Not only that, they can easily infiltrate other important networks. All it takes is one important member of another hierarchy having this condition. As a result, any society that doesn't aggressively and proactively seek out and destroy these networks will inevitably have their politics intertwined with pedophilia. Just like how a gang will ensure the loyalty of a new recruit by having them commit murder, these political networks will ensure the loyalty of their new recruits by their depravity. Therefore, if you live in such a society, I'd be suspicious of any new rising stars in any political circle. Individuals that didn't build up their own audience, but are instead getting heavily pushed by mainstream outlets for seemingly no reason. But do we actually live in such a society? It's impossible to know for certain, but there's no shortage of clues to look out for. Let's say, hypothetically, a prime minister had previously worked in the prosecution service of your nation, and when informed of over 1,300 cases of grooming and worse, he refused to investigate it and instead let them off a warning. That would be suspicious. Seems like that politician either has a network he's trying to protect, or some grotesque empathy for their crimes. Or perhaps you have a presidential candidate who campaigned on the promise of exposing one of these networks to the public. But once he got in power and acquired the evidence, he refused to do so, and even ridiculed the people who were still interested in it. Seems to me like he just got his hands on leverage over a new powerful network and isn't too keen on giving that up. Of course, these are all so far-fetched. Perhaps there's a more grounded way of confirming it or not. It'd be a safe assumption that if there are large pedophile networks in power, there would be downstream effects on society, and a drive to facilitate and normalize their depravity. For example, what if they exposed themselves in public parades where they knew kids would attend? Or what if they pushed explicit content to children's libraries or classrooms? What if institutions funded literal sex offenders to openly sing about how they're coming for people's children while still playing it off as satire? Or what if they threw their support behind the mass importation of another culture into your country, a culture that is known for being far more accepting of these crimes, in hopes of changing the fabric of society? And all of that without any consequences. No, surely that'd be way too obvious. The only way they do something that bold is if they became so powerful, or the well-intentioned so weak, that they're no longer afraid of getting caught.
They mask their instruction that exists within American schooling as inclusive. Well, we want to include everybody. That's why we have the gay books. That's why we have the transsexual books in the library. That's why we have all of that stuff. We make it available for everybody because we want everybody to feel included. Well, that blows to shit because the moment that you start bringing up having a Bible or something along those lines, or a book in there that talks about real history, that book isn't allowed. That should tell you again that it's not just the education system that is predatory toward children in a sexual nature, but that the systems that control the elements within the education system are also predatory, like, of course, the entire library association and all of the other library associations that control the kinds of books that find their way into school libraries. That's just one example. But look at the case of Jason Mers, which I've highlighted on the show before. You have a closeted gay man, in my opinion, who is a pedophile, in my opinion. Now, who's the superintendent? A flamboyant, openly gay man. How about the school board? The school board president is a lesbian. There are 3 men on the school board, all of which who are apparently married to women, but all 3 are beta males. There's not a single one of them that has a muscle on their body, not one. They're all weak. They demean women constantly. They demean anybody who disagrees with them, and that's what they do. They've had a school culture of male teachers sexually assaulting female students consistently, year after year after year, across decades. Title IX investigations, the whole thing. Very famously, they made excuses for Danielle Mann, who was TikTok famous and was on the Gateway Pundit for her post-2024 presidential election meltdown within her classroom on her own TikTok page, telling all girls to get intrauterine devices and be on birth control because every male who supports Donald Trump is a rapist. She gets a free pass. So when the environment protects people like that, It's protecting people like that because it's run by people like that. And then, of course, instead of firing a Jason Mers even after a Title IX investigation, which was remarkably damning, even though the decision maker came back and said, well, we don't have enough evidence because there were no witnesses and there was no video surveillance. They could have fired him, but they didn't. They promoted him. They gave him a pay raise, and then they moved him to a middle school. They empowered an accused pedophile. Which means, what do you think is going to happen? It's pretty obvious. When you empower an accused pedophile, they'll reoffend because they think that they'll get away with it. Even though, again, they were whatever. They were on paid administrative leave for an entire year with a pay raise. So if he's accused again, and there's no video evidence, and there's no witnesses, he thinks he'll get away with it again. He has to think that, either consciously or subconsciously. He has it in him, because what pedophile do you know only offends one time? They only offend once if they're caught the first time lawfully with enough evidence to put them away for a long time. But of course, once they get out, they almost always reoffend. This is how they operate. My point is that that's the business. That's the business, and that's the way that they operate. And that's what the physical education teacher is experiencing in her job, is she's expecting something to change, not knowing how bad it truly is. It's what the Corey DeAngelises of the world are not going to explain, that walking away from these environments is the only way that you fix them, by bankrupting them, burning them to the ground, and making sure that they never exist ever again, to become, of course, the pedophile playgrounds that they've become. And going all the way back to, again, the Soviet propaganda of the socialist realism, painting all of the posters around schools and around these environments as if they're all healthy and they're all worth it, and everything is great, and don't look here, everything is fine, Pride Month, Pride Week, Pride Day, blah, 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 rainbows, flowers, stickers, yearbooks, smiles, sports, cake, all the bullshit. All of that's done to gaslight people into believing that what goes on in the environment is 100% fine. And then you can be a David Brooks on PBS if you want, and just laugh off anybody who criticizes the environment for being degenerate, because everybody just has to listen to him. I've come full circle now, and I think you get it. It's pretty clear. You can't reform a system like that. You can't reform ideologies like that. The only thing that crushes them is the truth, and then walking away from them. Because if you walk away from them with the truth, then you bankrupt them in endless ways. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening as always. I'll catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.